NSFW, Reddit, what's your worst first date experience? I met up with a girl I'd met on OkCupid. We had planned to go to this little coffee shop. I get there about 15 minutes early and find that the place is closed inexplicably. I then return to my car to find out I had locked my keys and phone in my car. So I had no choice but to just sit and wait for her to show up so I could explain to her that the place is closed and ask her to help me get my keys out of my car. Went on a date with a guy I'd met through a mutual friend. Things seemed pretty normal until we were sitting and waiting for the movie to start. He got his phone out and started showing me pictures of two of his ex-girlfriends. Both women were completely naked. Were they hot? I had a casual first date with a guy at my apartment. We watched a movie that he had seen before and drank a bottle of wine and chatted. Toward the end of the movie there's a little blood, suicide attempt, and the guy walked into my kitchen. Pretended to get a glass of water. And dropped to the ground and started seizing. It was terrifying. I ran over and kept saying his name and after a few seconds I was about to call 911. When he woke up, realized what happened and just said damn it. Apparently the sight of blood really gets to him and this was not the first time this had happened. TLDR. Date started with wine and talking. Ended with him seizing on my kitchen floor. I went out with a guy that I had met on Tinder. The entire time. We argued. Either he didn't agree with me. Or I didn't agree with him. On anything. Normally. I don't argue with someone just because I don't agree with them. But this guy was so arrogant. After leaving the bar. He somehow thought it would be a good idea to ask me to come up to his place. Saying no. Was the last time I spoke to him. Oh man. I was talking to a guy online and we finally agreed to meet for a date. I get there and there is a woman sitting with him. It turns out that it was his wife and they were looking for a third. He never mentioned that during our chats and then called me a CNT for saying that I didn't want to get involved. Finally get to share this story. A couple of years ago I dabbled a bit with Tinder. Met one guy who was super cute. Traveled a lot. And seemed interesting. I suppose interesting was one word I could use to describe him. We start the date by getting lunch and a few beers at my favorite spot in town. We were chatting away and the topic of daydreaming came up. I asked him what he daydreamed about. His eyes then get a bit dark and his voice gets slow as he says, "When I daydream, I imagine the light leaving my enemy's eyes." By this point I was a few beers in and didn't know what to say. I respond with, "Oh. So how do you do it?" He looks away, ponders for a second and says, "Harpoon." The rest of the date was spent with him talking to me about his extensive anger issues and how he still lives with and bangs his ex. Hell. He had just banged her before he came to meet up with me. That was when I decided to stop using Tinder. Not shockingly bad. Just a little weird. She showed up with her overprotective older sister. Most of the conversation was with her older sister. When I asked questions, in 80% of cases her sister was the one answering them. The girl was cute. So after the awkward experience we agreed to have another date. Turns out she was so sheltered and shy. She was almost incapable of having conversation on her own. Yeah. We grew to be good friends. But other than that, in a more romantic way, she was a very closed person. Went on a date with a really aggressive guy. Had to call my Ukrainian, ex-Navy, 6'4" acquaintance to come save me. Dude threatened to call the cops on me because I left the date early, in his mind. FCK you know. I was so nervous I threw up on him and myself. No second date. First time out with my now fiance. We were at a local sushi joint. I was telling a story, actively using my hands, and knocked a glass over and we both watched it slowly roll off the table and onto the floor. Then not even 5 minutes later, a little, probably 2 years old girl is running around her family's table as kids do. Stops right next to our table and vomits everywhere. realizing that I was the guy who'd gained too much weight since his profile pic was taken. At least her look of disappointment motivated me to lose 40 pounds. My roommate in college was kind of seeing a girl for a couple weeks, and at a tailgate she was blowing my phone up wanting to meet up. I had an idea that she was interested, so I talked to my roommate and asked if it was cool if I took her out. He gave me the okay and said she was cool, but they just didn't work out. So that night we go out to dinner and she is super self-obsessed. Went on and on about herself the whole time and talked about all the things she hates about guys. It was a nightmare. We met up with her sorority sisters at a bar after dinner, and I ended up talking to her roommate the whole night and kind of joking about how bad the date went. Ended up dating the roommate for 2 years after we met that night. So a horrible date turned into a great relationship. So best of both worlds in one night. But damn, that girl was the worst. It was just an awkward date with no chemistry. But when he dropped me off near my apartment, he asked if I'd like to go on another date sometime. I tried to let him down easy, but he freaked out and wouldn't accept it until I explained why I wasn't interested. Nearly an hour later I finally told him that even if I had been interested, he ruined it by being creepy. Then he let me go. It's been 10+ years. But I'll never forget the last thing we said to each other. He asked, "Will I ever see you again?" And while scurrying away, I responded, "Only time will tell." Met a girl on Tinder. Arranged to go to lunch. Arrived at restaurant. So far, things are going well. She is late. I messaged her, "Hey, you still coming to lunch?" Full stop. No response. I decide to wait 15 more minutes, 30 minutes total. Just sitting at a table in my university's main dining spot. I leave. That sucked, but it happens. She messages me a day later, "Oh, sorry, I didn't feel like going." I guess it's technically not a date, but damn, that sucked. Met a guy online who missed our actual first date because he had to meet with his parole officer. I gave him a second chance because everyone deserves a second chance, and maybe he'd learned his lesson. First time meeting him, and I casually ask him about what he'd been in jail for, and he says a drug charge. Okay. Not terrible. Then he proceeds to go on and on about how he doesn't care that he went to jail. Doesn't care if he goes back. Etc. Yeah. Bye. I was making out with a girl on a cold evening on her unlit front porch. I just thought my runny nose was from the cold. But when we turned on the lights I realized I had a bloody nose. Her face was covered in blood. There was no second date. Went on a date with a girl I met on an online dating website. All she kept talking about was whether I thought anyone could tell we were on a date. She even made weird comments to the staff about us being on a girls' night out. As we were walking from the restaurant to a bar, I touched her arm lightly, and she jumped away from me as if she'd been electrocuted. Sounds like she was still in the closet and nervous about running into anyone she knew. Or she was experimenting. More funny than bad. She opened the door. Saw she was taller than me with her heels. Says, "OMG, I have to change my shoes," and closes the door in my face. Full stop. That is okay, I left my wallet in my car and she paid that night. So it was a short date hug. In high school I went on a date with this girl who went to a different school. I met her a couple times before. Anyways, I go to pick her up and the whole time on the date she is talking in this thick Texas accent. Now mind you, we live in the Northeast and I know for a fact she has never grown up in Texas. What made it worse is she's talking in this accent and talking about how my parents will love her, how we'll go to the same college together, etc. I finally said screw this. Dropped her off and blocked her on everything. The last I heard, she's a stripper who does witchcraft in her spare time. Not going to lie, that actually sounds like an entertaining stripper act if she did witchcraft on the stage. She showed up to our first date at an ice cream parlor with about 3 of her other friends unexpectedly. It was extremely awkward dealing with all these people I didn't even know. It didn't help that they seemed to take every opportunity to make me feel like I was the odd one out of place, like I was the inconvenience for them. I barely even remember talking to the girl I was actually on a date with. Had a bad Tinder date once. On chat she was nice and all. She had a broken laptop. I would come over and fix it. Watch a movie and stuff. When I arrived she was so stoned that she let me in and crashed on the couch. Fixed laptop, put on a movie and left. Met on Tinder. I mentioned I wanted to see a band playing at the local fair. He suggested we go together. We met up there and he wanted to win me one of those teddy bears from a game. Which was kind of sweet. He even told me I didn't have to keep it and we could donate it. They have donation bins for stuffed animals all over the grounds. All was going fairly well actually. We watched the band and then he suggested buying me a couple drinks after. As we are drinking and talking he just casually brought up that he deals drugs on the side. And that if it came between the drugs and his dog, he would choose the drugs. And if his dog's life ended over that then oh well. I just stared in shock. As he seemed fairly normal up until this point. I changed the subject. We finished our drinks. And I went home. I did give him a second date. This time without booze involved just to be sure it wasn't the booze talking. It was not the booze talking. There was no third date. Tinder date was obsessed with something called personology. Kind of like astrology. Biggest weeb I've ever met in my entire life. And I couldn't get rid of her to save my life. I couldn't get rid of her to save my life. So, you're married now? A girl I worked with asked me out on a coffee date. She was kinda hot. So I said sure. She immediately started telling this story about her weekend. Her friend got drunk at a bar. And said she wanted to give guys head. Her friend went to the washrooms in the basement. Put a paper bag over her own head, so she couldn't see who she was blowing. And then serviced a line of dudes. My date said she was there next to her friend. Begging her to stop the whole time. But wanted to make sure she was safe. I've never drank a boiling hot coffee so fast in my life. It's not NSFW but it was damn terrible for a teenage boy to experience. Was hitting it off with this smoking hot French speaking girl, the type they employ in nightclubs to dance in the cage or on the luminescent block. When out of the blue we stumbled into a friend of mine. The dude became somewhat a third wheel but actually managed to completely steal the girl away and started kissing in front of me after roughly 45 minutes. Here's the bad part. Dude didn't speak a word French. And they requested me to tag along to translate for each other. Needless to say it didn't take long for me to find a way out and spend the rest of my summer angry, humiliated and depressed. Never saw or talked to either of them since. All I know it lasted less than a week. I drove about a half hour to where the girl lived. Cause the weather was pretty iffy that day. And being the nice schmuck that I am, I wanted to do her a favor. She'd suggested a pretty decent looking cafe to meet at. Drove all that way just to be stood up. Mused a coffee. Sent her a few "I'm here. Where are you" messages. No reply to any of them. Listened to a band that was playing. And fiddled on my phone for about an hour before saying FCK it and leaving. Went back home and hung out with some friends. That place did make some pretty damned good coffee. Though. Plot twist, she owns the cafe and lures unsuspecting people to make money. This wasn't a date but me asking for a date. My freshman year of high school I asked this girl out after a football game. It would have been no problem except I was fully erect thanks to my raging hormones. I don't know if she or anyone else noticed but I was wearing loose shorts so I doubt they didn't. Lots of vomiting. While claiming she loved me and begging to suck my dick. Roommates were home to hear the whole thing. It was good for a laugh a few days later, however at the time I was mortified. Out at dinner night is going well. Some guy pulls up a chair to our table. Introduces himself as her husband. I got up and said sorry, did not know. Girl called me later that night. Said I could pick her up as she was single now. Met her at a music festival. First she yelled to a young black kid with a fishing rod to get out of here with your fishing. While we sat on a pier. I was speechless. Regardless. I was young and mostly just wanted to smash, so I carried on with her for the rest of the evening. Secondly, she made a point of saying that she wants to get to know my brother better. He was playing at the festival, with a finger in mouth super seductive way directly to my face. I left. Did not smash. I never texted her back after I got home and didn't see her again for many years until we ran into each other at a party. Was a double date with a girl who was friends with a girl living in my dorm. The girl was really shy. She just looked away all the time. I did everything to make her feel at ease, but she just wouldn't loosen up. We went out and she just stood in a corner of the dance floor. So I went and stood next to her and tried to talk to her. Only got yes and no out of her. We finally went back to the dorm. She quickly slipped away to her friend's room and I didn't see her again. The friend told me she really liked me and totally shut down because of that. And she got totally bummed out because of that. She didn't have the guts to talk to me in the morning. So she left very early to go back home. Definitely a whole evening and night wasted. First date nearly a year after my first serious girlfriend. I was maybe 19 at the time and we went to the outdoor movies. Went for a walk afterwards. Chatting. Holding hands. It was nice. Built up the courage to kiss her. In the 2 seconds from doing it to reaching her face I develop a raging boner that I know she has to feel. We walk back to my car. I drop her off and the next morning she messages me saying she wasn't over her ex. Started off with just terrible conversation. You know how there's always the first date questions. Favorite movie. Hobbies. etc. But normally they open up to a dialogue. She just went through them like a list. I attempted to ask her more open-ended questions but she kept answers short and then continued with her list. That made it a bad date. What made it the worst date? Her breath was horrendously disgusting. I swear she must have had several dead teeth or brushed them with horse tea. As the date continued I felt more and more nauseated from it. When I left it just got worse. I had to pull over while driving and I threw up. Didn't even get the window all the way down in time. Some have told me it must have been something I ate. Well, we only had a couple of drinks and no food. I ate dinner at home beforehand. The next day I ate leftovers to test if that's what made me sick. I was fine. TLDR. Her foul dragon breath made me vomit. It. Accused me of cheating when I beat her at the basketball machines in the movie arcade before the movie and was visibly upset I beat her. Laugher at me when I tried to make a move and then made an exaggerated show when I tried to pay for her ice cream afterwards. We were 15-16 I think. When my date went home with the waiter I owe. I once took this idiot on a date. She wanted me to pretend it was her birthday so she can get a free dessert. I thought it was a joke until dinner ended and she got up from the table and said, "Alrighty, I'm going to the bathroom. Call the waiter over and tell them it's my birthday." I didn't, and when she got back she legitimately got upset with me. She said it was free and I should have just done it. Then said we would just order it instead. I wanted that chocolate cake but out of spite I told her my stomach was hurting. Paid for the bill. And jetted out to my buddy's party. Went on my first date with a woman at her home. Insisted we sat in silence whilst Westlife were playing live on TV. Every time I tried to initiate a conversation I was met with a hand to my face. After the show she told me how her psycho ex stalks her and still visits from time to her. Also told me how she cut the brakes on another ex's car. Safe to say there was no second date. Waiting 30 minutes for her not to show up and the sad looks I was given by wait staff. She pissed on my windowsill. Edit. One night stand. Sat on it from inside. Pissed and let the piss drizzle from the side of the building. Because she needed to piss and was really high-ho, going to the bathroom was apparently harder task than to climb on the window. I was partially in flat reconstruction. But it wasn't that bad. Full piss sack of piss.